Now, as I promised in the Jonsbo TK2 video, we're going to cover the cooler that I used in that case for those benchmarks. And no, there's not going to be a repeatance of those benchmarks, there is going to be mention of those, but I'm going to give you some more, let's say, insights about varieties, what you could do with this cooler. And it's really cool because if you can place all three fans on your cooler. That is a possibility because after all, you do get a three-way splitter, PWM, for all three fans. But then again, if you don't have the possibility or the case is just that way designed that the third fan doesn't fit, there's loads of other varieties that you could do here. But let's cut to the chase. Today we're going to talk about Jonsbo Hx7280 CPU tower cooler with TDP up to 280 watts. And this is quite insane because this is definitely a high performance air cooler. And it really does perform outstandingly good, which I was a bit surprised to get those scores in Cinebench and to see all the thermals running AIDA64 in 30 minutes benchmark. But all in all, it is an outstanding cooler because, first of all, the design is outstanding. For you non-RGB lovers, this is a total stealth blackout edition without any RGB, and it will definitely appeal to you guys. So we have two passive heatsinks that have possibility to mount up to 3 fans, and that's what I did in first instance of the benchmark, placing 120 at the front, in the middle 140 and at the back 140. In this scenario, the 140 at the back actually was sticking out because of the cover of the, basically the passive heatsink of the VRMs and the cover of the IO ports on the motherboard. This comes into play when, if you have a low profile RAMs, you can go with two 140, one at the front and one in the middle. But if you have a high profile RAMs or RGB RAMs for some strange reason, when you're going with a stealth build, then you go with 120 at the front and 140 in the middle. And basically I didn't want to test out 140 at the front because it would be definitely sticking out just because of those RAMs that I had. Regardless of that, the benchmarks in both scenarios were outstanding. But before we go to benchmarks and before you check out everything else that you need to know about this cooler and how it performs actually, let's check out the specs. So what we have on overall dimensions, and this is quite interesting, 142 x 178 x 160. Fans are 140 x 140 x 25 for the 140mm, and 120 is thickness 25, 120 is the height and weight. Now TDP is 280 watts and we have a 6mm diameter 7-piece heat pipe. The fan speed of the 140mm fan is 700 to 1800 RPMs plus minus 10%. Then we have airflow 34.57 to 90.2 CFM, air pressure 0.46 to 2.74 millimeters H2O, and the maximum noise level is up to 38 decibels. With the LNA, fan speed for these fans is 1200 RPMs, maximum airflow is 57.81 CFM, and maximum air pressure is 1.14 millimeters H2O with maximum noise level at 28 decibels. Fan speed for the 120mm fan is from 700 to 1800 RPMs, airflow 32.47 to 83.04 CFM, and the air pressure is 0.47 to 2.68 millimeters H2O. Noise level maximum 37.6 decibels, and with the LNA low noise adapter 1100 RPMs, 45.56 CFM, 0.86 millimeters H2O, and maximum noise level to 28 decibels. Now when we're talking about connectors, we have 4-pin PWM, and you get the splitter as already mentioned, 3-way, which of course if you go with 2 fans you don't have to connect the third one. We have fluid dynamic bearing, and basically this is it. The whole and total weight of the cooler is 1 kilo and 280 grams. It supports Intel LGA 115X, 1200 and 1700, and when we're talking about AMD, AM4, AM2, and I tested it on AM5, so it works as well. Now the one thing that I didn't expect honestly was the thermal paste that I got inside this box, because I don't know, I just didn't expect it. We have Thermal Grizzly Hydronaut 1 gram of thermal paste, and I was totally expecting to get something like, you know, regular Jonsbo thermal paste or whatever they collaborate with, but we got thermal grizzly, which is outstanding, of course, because, well, it is an outstanding thermal paste and you can count on them, that's for sure. Now, when we're talking about mounting mechanism on AM5, you do need to remove those original retention brackets. You use 4 plastic standoffs, and then you just use those 2 metal retention brackets, one on top and one at the bottom. The screw, the threads on those retention brackets need to be facing towards your CPU, so do remember that. And then you use, let's say, regular screws that kind of do resemble to the original retention bracket screws from the motherboard. These are just black. Tie up those retention brackets through those plastic standoffs, and after that remove the plastic foil from the cold plate and apply thermal grizzly thermal paste on your processor and just evenly tie up the CPU tower cooler. That's it. Now, when we're talking about mounting the fans, as already stated, it all depends. Do you have low profile RAM or you have some RGB RAMs? And depending on the back side, you can go up to 3 fans, 120, 140, 140, or you can go 120, 140, or 140, 140. It all depends on the configuration of, let's say, VRM heatsink of the RAMs, and of course the depth and possibility inside the case. Now, since I used the Hx7280 inside the TK2, I really wanted to do 2 benchmarks, 2 different benchmarks. The first one, and what you saw in the TK2 video, was configuration of the fans on the Hx7280, 120, 140, 140. And in the second benchmark, I used 120 and 140 in the middle because, well, I have let's say RGB RAMs, so the 140 would be definitely sticking out and might cause the problem with, well, no, it won't. But regardless of that, I used 120 and 140. It's quite interesting what I got. So let's check it out. So you already seen the results when we were talking about TK2 and 120, 140, 140 configuration. 90 degrees in AIDA 64 Extreme Edition with clock speed on AMD Ryzen 9 7900 X3D, 4900 MHz, GPU is irrelevant here, and Cinebench thermals 85 degrees, clock speed 4950 MHz, and I stated that average Cinebench score was 26,460, which is quite fair, and I totally get it, it's quite alright, nothing too... I mean, it beats some 360 AIOs. In those terms, it's outstanding. And then we go with Hx7280 with 2 fans, 120 on the front and 140 in the middle. AIDA 64 Extreme Edition, what we get here is the same thermals, so 90 degrees, but the clock speed drops down by 50 MHz, which kind of does make a bit of a sense because the rear fan that I placed here kind of helps with the heat dissipation and exhaust, and that's still quite alright. When we're talking about 4850 MHz, that's still good. Then we go to Cinebench. Now, it starts at 85 and then eventually it starts increasing, well, basically it's not increasing, but the thermal's getting higher at 86, but it stays there. It's nothing drastical, you don't have to worry. So from 85 to 86. When we're talking about the clock speeds, it's also quite interesting because it varies. It goes from 4925 to 4950, and we get varieties where we have thermals at 85 with 4925 and then 86 with both 4925 MHz and 4950 MHz on average. This is still quite alright. Of course, we're going to see some oscillations, and of course we're going to see some differences when we swap up the fans. And then, I mean, Cinebench scores, I mean, these are quite solid, outstanding. Starts at 26,417, it drops down to 26,183, but it continues to bounce back, and I would say that somewhat an average here is 26,380, which is 60 or 80 Cinebench points lower. But it still competes quite nicely. It doesn't have that consistency because we don't get that additional fan exhaust at the back, because in this case the TK2 doesn't have an exhaust here at the back. But this one did help a bit and kind of prevented from air being trapped in the last heatsink. Let's put it this way, right? Even though that's a funny statement, I do have to admit that, but it kind of doesn't, but it doesn't get that complete push-pull combination through all two heatsinks. That's it. And since this 120 is pushing air through this heatsink, 140 is pulling air from this one and pushing through the other, then we have nothing pulling it out on this side. So basically these are the results. You do get some small decrease in performance, a bit lower clock speed, but nothing drastical. I mean, for 80, I would say it depends on the benchmark, and in that instance, depending on the benchmark in those 10 varieties of tests, you get eventually maximum 300 Cinebench points difference, which is still outstanding because it passed 26,000 CPU tower cooler, and that's really great. So again, something which I didn't expect, but I should have, because all Jonsbo products that I currently reviewed were definitely amazing, and I have to admit this one is amazing as well. And because of that PC Crazy Performance badge, because I haven't seen a CPU tower cooler perform this well on this CPU without even breaking a sweat. Okay, the thermals go really high, 86, even in AIDA reaching 90, but when we're talking about AMD processors, that's normal-ish. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the whole point of these generations of AMD processors. But regardless of that, it performs outstanding. It looks really nice and stealthy, and no RGB for you non-RGB lovers. Regardless of the fans that I placed here, these are the ones that they had for me to build this PC and to benchmark everything and to test everything. So yeah, it kind of is really an outstanding product, and without a doubt, big thumbs up and recommendations for you guys that don't want to go with an AIO, don't want to go with a custom loop, but really want to stick with air cooling. This is definitely something that that will definitely interest you. So as per usual, the link for the Hx7280 by Jonsbo is in the description below, and if for some reason you want to pair it up with a TK2, I'll place the link for the black version, because unfortunately there is no white version of the Hx7280. So if you want to go with the black and white, yeah, you could do that and combine something, but yeah, that's it. That's it, guys. Big thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. Hit the like button, click the notification bell. Hopefully I will see you in another video quite shortly. Bye bye.